I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know. I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up. I know what it took to take our economy from the depths of the pandemic to where it is today, the strongest economy in the world. I know what it'll take to bring this economy to everybody. I know what it'll take to rally the world, to stand up against Putin and defend freedom, not yield to him. And I know what it'll take to keep the world safe and free for the years ahead. Folks, I give you my word as a Biden, I would not be running again if I didn't believe with all my heart and soul.
After listening to the firing speech, that you felt that Joe Biden's different this time. At the North Carolina rally, that Joe Biden had this greater motivation, passion to connect with the voters. And of course, he understood clearly the first presidential debate. It was unprepared. It was disastrous, and the stake was too high. It's been almost 1 week. The whole world, especially the voters in the US, are still talking about the future of the country. But before getting to that part, people are still very much interested in knowing, what about Joe Biden? Is he going to be the final nominee for the Democratic Party? How about Donald Trump? We'll look at the two candidates, and one was convicted of felony. The other one, everyone is very concerned about his age, his agility, and ability to compete with Donald Trump, even for the September, the second presidential debate. How should we understand that? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Will, and welcome to this episode of The Missing Piece. We're very much interested in knowing, how should we understand the last presidential debate? And also, is it still too late to replace Joe Biden? What are the major hurdles and obstacles to stop Joe Biden from being replaced? In this episode, I was able to sit down with one of the amazing and talented experts all the way from Washington, D.C. And he shared with us a lot more information, not just about what we saw during the debate, but there are a lot more information that we did not know and yet are still critical to the fate of the country. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker. Again, if you follow our show closely and you know Scott Morgan. Scott Morgan not only is an expert on international affairs and particularly related to African region, but also he's an amazing expert on domestic topics. And we are going to dive into so much more with Scott today to talk about the fate of the country and also regarding Joe Biden's political performance and also his path to the presidential election. Well, brother, and welcome back to The Missing Piece.
Thank you, Will, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Scott, I know at the beginning when I mentioned the intro, and we talked so much about American politics for so long, but let's dive into the most fundamental question. After watching the first presidential debate between the former U.S. President Donald J. Trump and the current President Joe Biden, How did you evaluate the performance from both candidates? And also, why do you think at this moment Americans today are, I want to be careful, are even more confused between the two options? Your thoughts?
Those are good questions. And one thing, I'll start with the second question first because, we're actually seeing a sizable segment of the U.S. population that does not support either candidate. So, judging from the actions and reactions on Thursday night, it's possible that segment of the voting public could even grow. But overall, Thursday night, it was almost ironic because, it was just recently that the White House press secretary actually was criticizing the people talking about the videos showing the president in distress. We all saw the moment during the D-Day celebration where Prime Minister Maloney actually had to literally grab him because as he started to wander off. And White House press secretary actually said, that didn't happen. Those are just fake videos. It's kind of hard to fake live television. And it's hard to script it. Basically, sometimes, if you have the microphone, you have the cameras, just let things flow naturally. But still, that was just, hearing those statements and now seeing the people, the reactions were just stunning, because often, even after COVID, there's a sardonic comment that states that yesterday's conspiracy theories is tomorrow's headline news. And, and that is, that's an interesting metaphor to look at. To look at this case, but as we go deeper into the conversation, granted, people thought that Trump was lying. The president also made a couple things that stood out to me, also as a military veteran, particularly when he stated that there have been no American military fatalities during his term in office. We all know what happened at the Kabul airport during the withdrawal in 2021, where the 13 service members were killed by a bomb. And just earlier this year, three Army members were actually killed in Jordan during a UAV strike by pro-Iranian militias. So some people that actually know him also been critical of the president on that point specifically. But as we were going on, I actually have a couple of unique winners and losers that the media will not, some have talked about, but have to be revealed as we further go along, because the next 4 months here in the U.S. are going to be a complicated training.
Well, Scott, I want to continue our conversation. Let's go back to the most obvious question. From this standpoint, again, it's a battle between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But put in a larger way, it's actually the decision among the voters. Now, going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, as soon as the debate was over, and the next day, even less than 24 hours, the major news headlines, just came out one after another, that to claim that Joe Biden had a disastrous debate with Donald Trump and Joe Biden should definitely be replaced by any other possible candidates. From your perspective, constitutionally speaking, of course, we need to understand what are some of the ways for Joe Biden to believe that he should be replaced by someone else. And also, what does that mean for his political path or his career as a politician? At this moment, even though we follow the Twitter from former U.S. President Barack Obama, and he even admitted that bad debates happened. Again, he had a couple debates with different candidates, But again, particularly when it comes to Biden today, I think if I'm not mistaken, a lot more people and also a lot more Democrats believe that Joe Biden shall be replaced. So from your perspective, help us with better understanding by replacing Joe Biden, or if to believe that Joe Biden were to be replaced, does that really help with the Democrats, or how much could it really help even to favor Donald Trump's opportunity to become the next president for the country? What do you think of that?
Right now, I would say that if I was Donald Trump, and his campaign staff, I would make sure that Biden is not removed, because basically, there are several trains of thought that states that this election's over, Trump's going to win. The process by which Biden steps away is going to be long and complicated. And we're a little more than 30 days away from the Democratic convention, so basically that's a hurdle. Will Biden step down and release his delegates to vote to determine who the candidate will be? So, and then another question is, you hear some of the names that have been bandied about to replace President Biden at the top of the ticket. One name you haven't really heard a lot is actually the current vice president, Kamala Harris. And that has been one of the most loyal constituencies for Joe Biden. Would you risk alienating them? As you know, secondly, as we're a little more than 120 days away from the election, the states are already in the process of preparing the ballots. Some states already have the ballots printed up, with Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Jill Stein, Cornel West. That means if Biden is removed, that means they have to stop the process. They have to reprint new ballots. Some states will actually finish that process later in July. So that is another reason why some people will actually think, even though there's some people that don't want Biden as a candidate, he will most likely not be removed. But the ultimate factor in determining whether or not President Biden will be a candidate is actually the First Lady, Jill Biden. And I don't know if everybody saw that video after the debate on Friday night, where actually, she helped guide him off the podium. It's a concern. And then she was actually telling him, Joe, you did great. You answered all the questions. And it makes you, she did it in such a way that, like you would see someone talking to a toddler. And she was doing that. And because I actually were listening to some media outlets here in the U.S., and there were callers, mostly mothers, calling in, and they were criticizing the First Lady for that specifically. To her, after the debate ended. And then we all know, that they actually went to a Waffle House. President ducked through the door walking in, and he was still shuffling his feet. And then, they saw the campaign rally, which, everybody was, I actually saw some people ask, where was this president last night? Well, there was a teleprompter there. President has actually done a decent job reading off of teleprompter, even though there have been times where he's actually said next page. But just seeing some of the reaction, you can almost say it's crocodile tears, because there's several people, mostly on the right, to have been raising their concerns and actually have said, "We told you so. We told you that this was a problem." And now that people have actually saw it on live TV, and now there's like, whoa, what's going on here? But this brings up an interesting question. The special prosecutor Robert Hur, when he when he interviewed the president and made these comments about him he didn't want to prosecute him because he came across as, like the kindly old grandfather who was losing his parents but still meant well. And how he was crucified for this. And he is now vindicated. And the question is, when does he start asking for an apology from the Democrats in the House? Who actually had, during his testimony, he actually testified about his findings. How does he actually get called back up to the Hill for new testimony? And if that happens, how will he be treated? Will that happen? I do not know. It may be one of the things that will be interesting to see, because that may actually get wall-to-wall media coverage as well, because the initial overnight ratings for this debate was actually over 50 million people watched it. So ratings bonanza for CNN, and I would not call them moderators. I will call them questioners. But Jake Tapper and Dana Bash actually did an exemplary job asking the questions for both candidates. And they actually kept the flow going.
Well, Scott, let's bring another person into our conversation. You actually mentioned this person's name briefly, which is Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, again, before the CNN before the CNN debate, that he was not qualified to be part of the debate. And despite his effort and also his, tenacity, in campaigning and putting everything together. But meanwhile, when America were watching this debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, he actually had another separate debate live on Twitter. I mean, again, I was able to catch a quick glimpse of that debate. He was actually answering the questions as well regarding the foreign policy, immigration issue, the border, Medicare, healthcare, education, etc. So again, going back to your point, one candidate, the former U.S. President Donald J. Trump, was charged by 34 felonies. Joe Biden is facing the brick wall because people are very concerned about his next presidential debate in September, and also his health, and of course that's what's going to happen to his relationship with Kamala Harris. So does that mean that Americans today start to process and start to think about the third party candidate? I mean, again, you mentioned a lot of names, Cornel West and Jill Stein. Of course, we'll also look at the candidate from Libertarian Party and also the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So what does that say about those candidates, and particularly about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Does that mean that it's actually gaining more attraction, or he will gain more traction based on the performance from both candidates last Thursday? What are your thoughts?
That's a good question. We will find out in the polls when the next polls come out. Because there's the first snap poll that actually came out after the election show that Donald Trump actually had a slight lead in New Jersey, of all places. Regarding the third party, American third parties have not really done well in American history. Ross Perot and the Reform Party, in the '92 election did well. He almost got, his perception because because of the messages of the other candidates, George Herbert Walker Bush and Bill Clinton. Because right now a third party candidacy will actually be seen as which candidate does he take the most votes away from. Because some of the consensus is that, when like those who are against the COVID vaccine and other vaccines, feel, but then he made the consensus he will take more votes away from Trump on that. And others, maybe feel that, he may actually take some Democratic votes away from Joe Biden. Because actually, Mr. Kennedy has actually come out and told the DNC, if you want to replace Biden, I'm willing to do so. So that will lead the thought to is he an actual viable third party candidate? And then with the other candidates for the Libertarians, the Greens, and Cornel West and others, if we see a detailed poll seeing if they receive any bump in the numbers after what happened on Thursday, that has yet to be seen.
Scott, I want to ask you another question regarding another person's name has been flowing around, which is Michelle Obama. I mean, again, I don't know if you ever heard that long before this first presidential debate, that Michelle Obama's name was flown around. That, again, even despite the fact that she never expressed her interest in participating in the American political arena or the political path, but people have suggested that she should consider to run as a Democrat. I mean, again, given the fact that her husband successfully locked in this presidency for 2 terms. And of course, Obama created this profound legacy despite all the controversies. Now, from your perspective, what do you think of the possibility or even this idea that Michelle Obama should be nominated as the replacement of Joe Biden, even though you just said, I mean, it could be too late, or maybe some of the states have already printed out the ballots. But again, Michelle Obama, indeed, that she had a lot of attractions and also attention in the media and, of course, among the voters, and particularly within this Democratic Party. So what do you think of her percentage, and what do you think of her opportunity that really to jump into this political arena and to help the Democratic Party to defeat Donald Trump, or even to defeat anyone that from this conservative perspective? Your thoughts?
If she was actually doing more campaigning for Democratic candidates, I would be more inclined to agree with that. And also due to the fact that she has also spent time inside the White House complex, as First Lady. It's a certain lifestyle, but as you know, but it's also taxing, taxing on a person. So, part of it is she may not be interested in politics. Another thought process is that she would have to go through the daily routine of being inside the White House again, where everything is so micromanaged. Well, however, another name I've actually heard some people banter about, and she's actually getting ready to start a book tour soon. Hillary Clinton's name has also been bandied about as a potential replacement for Joe Biden. And also, some people are also been bandied, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who people will remember he was actually at the debates Thursday night. Kamala Harris, the vice president, was not there. Newsom was. That talk about whataboutisms that could and should be asked. That's a good one. Why was not Kamala Harris there or in Atlanta? Because she was actually in Atlanta twice in the last 2 weeks when she cannot be there for this debate. Why not? Right? Then again, and that also raises the attention to detail made by the staff in the White House. Why would you not have the vice president there? You had the governor of California.
That is an interesting perspective. Scott, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. Again, the next debate, it's going to happen in September. I mean, again, we're looking at in a couple months away. But based on the performance that we saw last Thursday, from this global perspective, what message did it send to the whole world? I mean, again, keep in mind that the news and also there were a lot of talks on the street that if Donald Trump were to become the next president, it's possible that he's going to withdraw again from NATO, and also he's going to sign off or even to try to stay out of the Paris Climate Agreement again. I mean, again, everything that Donald Trump will do, it's going to continue his Make America Great Again agenda. But meanwhile, that we're still looking at Joe Biden's political records, support Ukraine, and also right now standing the crossroads with Israel, and also the hot war among the countries in Africa, and also this competition with China, etc. So by looking at this presidential performance for Joe Biden and also from Donald Trump, what message did that send to the whole world? And should the world be more anxious about Donald Trump's comeback, or even more worried about Joe Biden's second term? I want to hear your final thoughts.
One of the best tweets I saw Thursday night, Friday morning said, all the world's intelligence agencies were watching this debate and are making and or adjusting their plans accordingly. I would actually we'll go with this. Potentially on the international scale, probably the biggest winner may actually be Bibi, Prime Minister Netanyahu, because a Trump administration would be more friendlier towards him, regardless of weapons and support for a negotiation. So basically, judging by that, and Hamas will probably realize that if they're going to have a negotiated ceasefire with Israel, their best chances of getting one on reasonably favorable terms to them will happen as long as Joe Biden remains in office. And another thing is what another country is actually they could be concerned with is actually Iran. Just yesterday they had elections for the presidency after the death of the previous president in a helicopter crash, and that will be going to a runoff soon. So that could be as well. Another thing is that when talking about Ukraine, when Trump says that he would push for a negotiated settlement, there are a lot of neocons definitely will not like that message. So Ukraine could actually be their policy would be more nuanced, instead of like one of the perceptions of the Biden administration is that Zelensky comes to Washington and uses Biden as an ATM machine. That perception is out there amongst some Republicans, and a Trump victory will actually figure it out, because Trump has actually stated that when it comes to that conflict, one of his goals will be a negotiated settlement. Regarding the Indo-Pacific, we actually could see more resolve in U.S. relations in the region. Trump may actually expand on the AUKUS deal. I was going to say, even though the military part of it, is moving forward. Trump could actually double down on that, and that's something people are not really talking about. But
Well, I mean, again, at this moment, we don't know what is going to happen to the U.S. But again, as an international community member, that we have to pay closer attention to the current political state and also the complication in the U.S. And hopefully that by the time in September that we're going to see more miracles and we're going to see a better answer regarding the future of the country. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to speak to Scott Morgan. Again, Scott Morgan has been one amazing expert, not only related to international affairs, but also related to domestic affairs and also this international economic and also this international trade, etc. And there again, it's such an honor to speak to our good friend Scott Morgan. Brother, thank you so much for taking your time to be on the show, and love to have you back on the show for future topics.